Okay, creating simple geometric looping animation here in Adobe Flash. So I am going to get the rectangle tool here, and I have a fill color but no stroke. I could use a stroke, but I'm choosing not to, just to make it a little bit simpler. Also, if I want to be a little bit more precise, I can go to the View drop-down menu and say to show the rulers. And so now that the rulers are here, you can kind of see how, let me move that a little bit so you can see how there's little lines here kind of showing you where your cursor is. So I can just roughly line it up so it's at the 50 by 50 pixels, and I'm going to drag out a shape with the rectangle tool, and if I want it to be a perfect square, I'm going to hold down Shift while I do it, and that'll constrain proportions. Now I can kind of eyeball it to the 250 right there, so it's, you know, it doesn't have to be precise, but helps a little bit. So there I have my red square on layer 1. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate and change the colors to get the basis for my cascading kind of color change in animation here. So I could copy and paste in place and scale it down. I could do this all in one layer if I wanted, but I think it's going to be easier to just do it this way, which is to right click or control click on the layer in the timeline panel and say duplicate layers. So now I've got two layers that are the same. So if I was to change this top layer, you can see it's the active layer. I'm going to just change that to a different color, like green. It looks exactly the same because they're overlapping each other. I'm going to go over here to the free transform tool, keyboard shortcut Q, and I'm going to shrink this down. If I hold down Shift, it's going to constrain proportions so that it stays a square. Alright, so there's the first one. I'll go back here to the timeline and I'll duplicate it again. Change its color to something else. Get my free transform tool. Hold down Shift to constrain proportions, and I can look at the ruler if I want to have a better sense of how much of a gap I'm leaving here. Just estimating it. It doesn't have to be super precise. And I'll do that one more time. Duplicate layers. Change it to a fourth color. Hold down Shift to constrain proportions. So you can see that I'm scaling from the center, which is my default, but if your default is set to scaling it from the opposite corner, just hold down the Option button while you're scaling it, as well as the Shift button, and the Option button or Alt button is going to have it so that you scale it from the center rather than the opposite corner. Right now, because my default is to scale it from the center, if I hold down my Option button, it will do it from the opposite corner. I'm just going to undo that. Okay, so I've got 4 layers. Each layer has its own colored square on it. Again, this could all be done on one layer, but I'm going to keep it separate. Hopefully that'll keep it simpler, and if not, I apologize. Alright, so I'm just going to rename these by double clicking on the layer name, and I'll just call this one 1, call this one 2, 3, and 4. Great. So for this exercise, we want to animate it on 2, so that means we want to have a keyframe on every other frame. So remember, a keyframe influences all frames on the active timeline until you either get to the end of your active timeline or until you get to another keyframe. So I'm just going to highlight the strip of frames here on frame 3, and I can either hit F6 or right click and say insert keyframe, and now I've got 2 keyframes there. It looks the same because it's the exact same information, but if I was to change it on the keyframe here, it would not change the information on this keyframe there. Alright, so I'm going to do this because I got 4 squares. I'm going to do this so that I have 4 sets of keyframes. So I'll just go here to frame 5, drag down so they're all selected, and I'll hit F6 this time. I'll do that one more time here on frame 7, F6, and because I want this to be animated on 2s, I got to make sure I've got an extra little bit of padding here at the end so the last keyframe sticks around for 2 frames. So I'm going to hit F5 to add just a regular frame instead of a keyframe, or right click and just say insert frame. So right now if I hit play, you can see it plays, but nothing happens because all the information on the keyframes is the same. So now let's go ahead and change it. So I can just get my eyedropper tool, and if I want I can just go ahead and get my paint bucket, go there, and I'm going to use my period key to advance my frames to frame 5, and then I know it's going to be there, and then I'll use it to advance the last one and put it there. Alright, so now if I go back to the first one, actually the second one, I'm going to get my eyedropper tool, get the blue, have it go to the outside one, again using my period key, or I could use this I suppose too, just keep advancing and advancing the frame, and just keep having that color step down with each keyframe, so you can see it's starting to come together here. Okay, so that green I is the keyboard shortcut for the eyedropper tool. Get that green, and I'll advance to frame 3 now, and I know that the green will now be here, and go to frame 5, and now it's going to be there. To the last one, it's going to be there. Alright, it's trying to make sense yet? I mean, I could go through and change each color on the frame. I'm just kind of doing a little bit more assembly line. So what's left here? We got yellow, right? I for the eyedropper tool, get that yellow color. Use my period key, or with the less than symbol over it, to advance 1 frame. And I can see that the yellow is going to have to go to the center now, and then on frame 5 it comes out to the outside, and for frame 7 it would be 1 in. So let's see if that does it. There you go. So if I go to control, I can say loop playback, and then what that'll do is when you get to the end of your active timelines, the playhead will go back to the beginning again and it'll loop. The other way to have things loop is there's this loop button right here that will let you loop a range, but for something short like this I just usually use the control loop playback. Just get a sense of how it's working. Okay, and that is how to make a simple geometric loop for our assignment. You could also do this with a circle or star, or really any shape you want, but I'm just keeping it simple and doing it with squares right now.